Okay, let's get started. Good evening and welcome to tonight's program on how to be an Audubon at Home Ambassador, brought to you by Loudoun County Public Library and the Loudoun Wildlife Association. I'm Lorraine Moffa, Programming Coordinator for Loudoun County Public Library, and it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker. Nan McCarry is an Audubon at Home Ambassador with Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy. For 6 years, she facilitated landscape for life classes in the area. Currently, she enjoys working at Watermark Woods Native Plants and the nonprofit organization Imagine Being Well. At home, she works on converting 3 acres to a native food forest. Before we get started, let me just mention that if you have any questions during the program, please type them in the chat box and I will relay them to Nan when she's done with her presentation. And let's get started. Hi, Nan.
Hi, thanks very much. Really excited to be doing this today. And again, excited to see some people I know in the audience there. So this presentation was actually originally put together by Ann Owen. I just want to give her some credit. She was the organizer of this program for several years and has moved from the area. But I want to thank the Loudoun County Public Library and Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy for collaborating on this. So this is a program about the Audubon at Home program, which you may be interested in having someone visit you from Audubon at Home, and you can learn more about that here today. And so this is called No Yard Too Small. So that's because we just go across the whole spectrum of from very small to large. Let me close my door just 1 second. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, so Audubon at Home encourages everyone from, if you have a balcony with a few pots, or if you have a farm of many acres and anything in between, to think about native plants for our wildlife, and we will talk about that today. So yeah, please put questions in the chat and feel free, Lorraine, to stop me at any point. This is a very informal presentation.
Will do. Thanks, Nan.
Okay, so we know that at some point before humans, the landscape was much more contiguous with plants and vegetation and animals, and so we like to just sort of see what we can do to give back. These days, it looks more like this. And of course, we've lost a lot of habitat and we continue to lose more. Population continues to go up. And in this area of the country, of course, we continue to have a lot of building. So it's really worthwhile seeing what we can give back within where we live, and the yards around our homes can really add up to a lot if we garden in them in a way that supports wildlife. So along with that, we have a lot of yards that look like this, and this doesn't really provide a whole lot in terms of what we call ecosystem services and in terms of wildlife habitat. And even, okay, and here's a typical suburban planting, but even this, even though there is vegetation and there are trees and shrubs, we'd like to point out that most of them are not native, and so this tells you where many of these trees and shrubs are from. They're what we call non-native, and we'll learn tonight, and many of you may know this already, that Doug Tallamy has really taught a lot of us about how it's very important to have the native plants in the landscape because they co-evolved with the wildlife that lives here. And so the wildlife that lives here, especially the insects, can't really use these plants from Asia and other countries. In fact, a lot of them were brought in by the landscape industry over the decades, specifically because insects are not going to chew on these leaves, and so they're going to look very perfect. We really, those of us in this native plant movement, really like to see chewed holes in our leaves. It actually means that the plant is giving back something and feeding the local wildlife. So these continue to be put into our yards by the landscape industry, and we would just like to encourage you to do something different. And insects are very important. So this is the basis of the whole food web. As we know, energy comes from the sun. And then the way that energy gets into the ecosystem is through plants, through the process of photosynthesis. So, and then the way that that energy keeps moving into the ecosystem is largely through insects. So insects need to predate or eat plants and then take that energy into the rest of the food chain. We find that about 90% of plant-eating insects are specialists, and that means that they may only eat one or a small number of plants. Those are the only plants that they're adapted to eat because leaves have toxins in their leaves. I'm sorry, plants have toxins in their leaves because plants don't want to be eaten. So the insects that have adapted to feed on those leaves are usually very specialized on those leaves. Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah, and then you've seen a food web before, but once again, I want to point out the basis of the food web are the plants, and then the second level are the insects. And you can see the insects here, the various ones, and that's what gets the energy that the rest of the ecosystem needs, all the rest of the animals need to operate in the ecosystem. So it's really important to have native plants that can feed our native insects, the insects that evolved here with those plants. And we do see a great decline in insects, and this is really brought home by what many of us, if we're over a certain age, when you see down here at the bottom, it says, think, when was the last time your windshield was covered in bugs after a summer drive? So many of us remember that when we were kids, that was the case. There were a lot of insects around, and you know, now we sort of have clean windshields and clean headlamps, and there's just fewer insects around. And some people may feel like they don't like insects, but there's very few insects that are actually troublesome to humans. Most of them are just doing a great job in the ecosystem and are very important components of that ecosystem. And as we're going to see, that's what feeds the birds. Okay, and here we'll get into this. This again is Doug Tallamy's work, and he found that it takes 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars over 16 days for a pair of chickadee parents to raise one brood of chickadees. So that's a lot of caterpillars. They have to go out and find 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars. These caterpillars need to be eating leaves. They need to be munching on native plants, on the plants of the species that they evolved with, or maybe the genus that they evolved with. That is the way the parent caterpillars can get the food to their offspring, because the baby chicks can't eat things like seeds. You know, they need something soft that can slip right down the gullet, like a caterpillar does that beautifully. So we say a world without insects is a world without birds. Or amphibians, or many other things. Our amphibians, as you may know, are another really important part of our ecosystem, which is really at threat, and that would be our frogs and toads, which are one group, and our salamanders. And we really need to support all of those. So The Audubon at Home program supports people who want to create and sustain native wildlife habitat. So this is most often in your own yard. We also work with HOAs, and as I said, with larger areas like farms. Really, we'll work with almost anybody. And we are a group of volunteers, and so you're not getting a landscape designer. You're getting a volunteer who's enthusiastic about native plants and has learned some things about native plants. And we will come to your home for free and offer this service to help you think about what native plants you might want to bring into your yard, which ones you already have there that you might not even know about. And also, very importantly, will help you identify invasives, which is another big problem. So this is a partnership between Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy, the Audubon Society of Northern Virginia, and Plant Nova Natives. I do want to mention a little more about Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy if you're not familiar with us. Great organization, so many programs, both for families and for adults, a lot of bird watching, citizen science, habitat restoration, advocacy, really wonderful programs, and you can find us online. And we are a membership organization, so we encourage you to support us if that's something you would like to do. So what does wildlife need? We call that habitat. Now here we see one of our milkweeds. This is Asclepias tuberosa, which is the orange milkweed, which is really quite striking. And this is the zebra swallowtail feeding on nectar from that plant. So habitat is something that everybody needs. Even humans need habitat. We all need a place to live. The key elements of that are shelter, water, food, and space. So we're going to talk about some of those and how you can provide those in your yard for wildlife. So when we talk about food, we want to emphasize the right food. So many people put in things like butterfly bush. We don't encourage that. That's actually becoming rather invasive in our forests and our landscapes, and it doesn't provide the correct nutrition that our pollinators are looking for. Even though you may see some you will definitely see pollinators on this plant, but it's not the one that you want to be planting if you want to bring pollinators and really help them out and feed them well. So let's see, Plant Nova Natives will help you find which natives to put in. We especially want to avoid the non-native exotics, which is what we saw in some of the first pictures, the landscape trees and shrubs from Asia, such as burning bush and English ivy is just really a bad one to bring in, and Bradford pear, autumn olive. Those are our exotics that we don't want to bring into the landscape. And we'd like you to remove invasives, and we can talk more about invasives. So the best explanation for laypersons of this concept is, again, it's from Douglas Tallamy, who's an entomologist at the University of Delaware. He wrote a book in 2009 called Bringing Nature Home, a wonderful book that explains this concept. He's also a great speaker. If you ever have a chance to hear Dr. Tallamy speak, he really does a great job presenting this concept. And then he's recently written Nature's Best Hope. And he also has an organization now called Hometown Habitat. And that's kind of fun because you can, if you are planting natives in your yard, you can get yourself on their map. And there's fireflies for each little yard that's on the map. And he's encouraging us to, if we all plant natives in our yard, he says it's going to be like another national park. So he likes to call it the Homegrown National Park. So please check out Hometown Habitat, Homegrown National Park, if you want to Google that. And the firefly symbol is really important because the fireflies need those leaves, by the way, that you want to leave on your lawn and on your bare places, because that's where firefly larvae need to live so that we can continue to enjoy our fireflies. It's just an aside. Okay, shelter is another thing, and there's many ways of providing shelter. There are brush piles, what we call snags. We like to leave a tree that has died because actually it's a great home for many for insects, for woodpeckers, other kinds of birds, and you can always cut it off if it's too tall or some sort of a threat to you. Um, this kind of vegetation down here, this is actually Sporobolus, our prairie dropseed. You can see that this provides shelter for different sorts of critters that would be able to hide under the leaves here. And oh, rock walls are wonderful for things like lizards. Here we have a bee that is using, many of our bees live in the soil, and so they need bare places in the soil where they can make their homes. We don't actually encourage these anymore, these bee houses. It's quite a lot of work to keep them clean enough so that they don't transmit fungi and things like that. So we're not really encouraging those. It's great to look for natural ways to do this, such as down here, leaving your stems into the fall and winter, and a lot of bees will lay their larvae in those stems. And so if you leave those, that's a much better way to make homes, winter homes for those insects. Okay, and water is very important. Here we have a wonderful vernal pool that we have here in Luckett's, which is a natural area which supports our amphibians. It's a wonderful thing to conserve. Not everybody has a vernal pool in their backyard, but you can provide water, which most all animals are going to need water, and so it can be everything from a little bird bath to a pond, to many other things. So, to organize a native garden for wildlife, you want to think about habitat and creating a diverse ecosystem. So, you want to combine flowering plants and grasses and sedges, shrubs and trees. You want to aim for flowering, fruiting throughout the year because you want to provide things for animals at different parts of the year. Um, there are layers for varied habitat, um, and I'm going to show you that in the next picture. And you want to provide corridors. So you want to start to think in terms of corridors. This is very important, especially with climate change. Wildlife need to move freely through corridors. And in terms of plants, the greater the area that the plant has to migrate, the better the genetics can be, because the more diversity there can be in the genetics of the plant. And then as the plants need to migrate north, they will have paths to follow rather than just clumps in different places. So think in terms of corridors and how you can connect your yard with maybe natural corridor, natural areas and other yards, and thinking in that way. And then you want to provide access to clean water, nesting sites, and shelter. So this is just emphasizing more about the layers, the structure. So this slide shows the different stories in a forest sort of setting and how different birds are looking for different layers here. So here we have the canopy on the left, oaks and hickories, and then up here you can look and see oh, that's above the canopy. You have like the hawks and the eagles. In the canopy, you would have the owls, the woodpeckers, vireos. So for each of these, here you can look at the mid-story. It tells you which plants you would want to plant that go to that mid-story level. And then this will tell you which of the birds, if you're interested in attracting birds, are going to tend to congregate in that story. So they're all important down to the understory and then down to the ground cover. And this is where you might want to have grasses that make places for the birds to find a home, and things like turtles also are looking for shelter. So we along these lines, we want to minimize man-made hazards to wildlife. So, pesticides, number one. Please avoid spraying against mosquitoes and ticks. I know we all are concerned about ticks, and we just have to employ personal protection, either dress for the ticks. I really just make it a habit to check myself for ticks and every day, and then you can shower and just make sure that the ticks are not attached for a long time. That's just the way it has to be done. When you spray pesticides, you're not just killing the target insect that you're going after. You're killing everything. You're killing the beneficial bees and all of the pollinators because they're all susceptible to these pesticides. So it's really something we want to stay away from. There's a special kind of a specific kind of pesticide called neonicotinoid, and you want to think about buying plants that are raised without neonicotinoids. And by buying at trusted native plant nurseries, you can achieve that because you can ask about that. Avoid poison or glue rodent traps, and keep cats indoors. Now, I know this is a challenge, but especially in our suburban areas, it's amazing how many birds the cats actually kill. So we want to keep our cats indoors and keep them from killing the birds. Turning off outdoor lighting is just so important. The nocturnal insects, like the moths, of course, they are confused by the outdoor lights and they can't survive, and migrating birds as well. So it's really important. I actually, it took me a while to get around to turning off this particular outdoor light that I felt I had on for safety reasons. And I was telling a friend the other day, like, the stars are brighter this year. And she said, it's because you turned off that outdoor light. So it's also nice for us. We have a beautiful view of the stars now, but it's really hard on the moths and the nocturnal insects when we have outdoor lighting. And Loudoun Wildlife is starting more programs to educate the public about that. And then you want to think about bird window collisions. So many birds are killed by flying into windows. So no yard is too small. You can start with whatever you have. And we're going to go through some examples here of different size yards and what the people were able to attract. So here's a single family home. And this is in a suburban area, but they have done an amazing job of putting in just a ton of native plants. And they actually live in an HOA, and they've been able to do this. And they have attracted 35 butterfly species, over 65 bird species, dragonflies, and frogs and skinks. And here we have a townhome. So here the owners, since they put this in, have found swallowtail, fritillary, and monarch butterflies, the ruby-throated hummingbird, and frogs, toads, and an eastern box turtle. So that's really exciting. And here we just have people who have containers on their patio deck or yard. So you wouldn't think you could do much with that.
Can you
But
go back to that last slide?
yeah. This one?
Yeah. So what is that on the lower left? It's just a raised bed?
Oh, over here on this where the cinder blocks are?
Yes.
You know what? I have to be honest. I think that this is just showing the process of the homeowners building this area. I actually did not look into why she put the slide in here. I've been thinking that's what it probably is, though. It's just showing sort of how they went about building the area.
A raised bed, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting, yeah.
Sorry, I don't have a better answer.
Oh, that's okay. Before and after someone saying, yeah.
Ah, thank you. Perfect.
Okay.
Okay, so even in these containers on a deck, they found swallowtail, silvery check spot, common buckeye, and monarch butterflies. Over here, you can see one of the monarch caterpillars on one of those orange butterfly milkweeds that I showed you earlier. Goldfinches, juncos, house finches, native bees, and katydids. As you probably know, native bees are so important. Native bees are different from our honeybees. Our honeybees are really a domesticated animal that serves a purpose in industrial agriculture. But our native bees, we have about 400 in Virginia, and it's very important to support them because some of them are not doing so well, and they do a lot of our pollinating. And so getting started, I put a few pictures in here of things in my yard. It's so exciting. I'm not so excited that the weather's changing so much, but we are having really beautiful blooms this year. Actually, up here is the native Virginia strawberry, which is a really nice plant you can put in that you can both eat the strawberries and you can enjoy the blooms. So you want to start with small steps. Now, the example we have here um, is actually at Crossroads United Methodist Church, where B.J. LaCrone and others got a grant to do a native plant garden. So this is just showing how she went about that, which is a good example of how you can go about doing something in your yard. This was grass here over on the right, and so they removed the grass and they put down mulch, and then they started planting these native plants. And as you can see, the following summer, they had quite a few native plants. And of course, this was several years ago. So this has just gone um, on and just been a wonderful spot. So what you want to, it's a lot like gardening with anything. Let's see, I'd add compost or leaf mulch if your soil's compacted. You want to think about plants for throughout the blooming season, and this is good for supporting your bees throughout the season because, like the red buds that are out now, will support our very early spring bees. And then in the fall, you want to have things like asters and goldenrods for your late fall bees. It's attractive to plant in groups of 3 or 5, odd numbers, leaving space between them to spread. Let's see, mulching between the plants until they fill in to minimize weeds. And I actually often put down some cardboard underneath the mulch. It can be very hard to keep an area weeded if it's large. You don't need special handling for native plants. A lot of them are wildflowers and really want to grow in your soil. You want to think about the level of sunlight and moisture that you have. You don't want to add fertilizer. And the native plants don't need fertilizer, and because they're just adapted to grow. And then the other thing about fertilizer is we really want to think about that. It's really as bad as the pesticides because fertilizer runs off of yards and into our rivers and streams and eventually into the Chesapeake Bay and contributes to the dead zone. So when we're fertilizing our lawns, that's something to really think about if you really need to do that, and to do it as little as possible, and to do it at the right time of year. And you can find out more information about that. So as we were saying, if you can leave the stems and the seed heads standing through the winter, think about food and habitat for overwintering birds and insects. And it's fun to just buy a few perennials and then start dividing them over 2 to 3 years. And, over time, you really can cover quite a large area or share with friends and neighbors. And as we said, you want to see those leaves that have been chewed on. That's a good thing. That means you're supporting the ecosystem. Here's an easy way to get started. This is the Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy Super 9. So we have just 9 plants to start with that will support our wildlife throughout the season. and most of these are pretty easy to grow, so they're just a really good way to start. This one over here in the middle left, golden ragwort, many of you may be familiar with it. It's a really nice spreader. If you have areas that you really are worried about weeds taking over, it can really help you with ground cover. So here's some books that we recommend. Native Plants for the Small Yard. This book from the Native Plants of Northern Virginia. I think it's more than $6.50 now, but you can either buy that at various places or you can download the PDF from their website for free. This is a great way to get started. Beautiful book, great pictures, lots of information, and it just helps you sort of narrow down the number. If you go to a native plant nursery, it's almost overwhelming to see how many choices there are. So this gives you some things to start with. And then says slightly more advanced. So this was done by Loudoun Wildlife and gives a lot of detail about which wildlife go to which plants. So when you get into it, you can really use this to target the wildlife that you'd like to support. So again, we encourage you to commit to pesticide-free gardening by buying native plants at specialist native plant nurseries or native plant sales. I'm going to tell you about one of those in a minute. We also have, Plant Nova Natives has a list of native-only sellers that are in the metropolitan area. So you can if you go to Plant Nova Natives, you can find all sorts of information that I've referred to today. And this is just showing some different things. This is a plant called Pussy Toes, and this is a caterpillar I found on my Pussy Toes. And this, I think, is the elderberry beetle. Anyway, this is my elderberry. You just get really fun insects on your plants when you don't spray. Because again, if you're going to spray, you're going to kill everything. And of course, we want to support our native bees. So pretty soon we have a spring native plant sale sponsored by Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy. This is a really fun event. It's held at Morven Park. Over on the side that's on Southern Planter Lane that you enter near Rust Library. So yeah, April 22nd, this is Earth Day, and we have several sellers come every year, and so it's a really fun way to get more information and buy some plants, and it's a really nice event. So here's some information for you. I think the best thing to do would be to I would probably just Google Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy Audubon at Home, and you can find all of these resources. So you can find more about the sanctuary program. If you're interested, you can fill out an application, which includes your healthy yard pledge. I needed to update this email address. So this is actually going to be aah@loudounwildlife.org. And so you can have as we said, we can have an ambassador visit you for free. And then to qualify as a wildlife sanctuary with Audubon at Home, you need to have 2 critical habitat features, which are outlined on the website there. And you only need to record 10 sanctuary species. We have specific animals that that you can pick from, but there's lots of them. I mean, if you're a person who goes out in your yard and sees insects and birds and the occasional toad, you're going to be great. You're going to be able to fill out your form. So, and you can get a sign to display. You can buy a sign to display so that your neighbors know what's going on and can be encouraged to perhaps think about going in this direction. And here's our resources list. So thank you. And here again is the email address that you should use to contact any of us and find out more. Or as I said, Google Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy Audubon at Home. So I'm ready for any questions if you have any.
Thanks, Dan. The first thing I want to say is someone said that the slides weren't clear, and they're really clear on my screen. If anyone else had that problem, let me know. We are recording the program, and I'll know pretty quickly whether or not the quality is good in the recording. And if it is good and someone wants me to send them the recording, you can send me your email address, or it will be on Loudoun County Public Library's YouTube page next week. Scott, I'll send you a copy. And a couple people said they're all clear on the slides. So I guess, Scott, it must have been your internet maybe being a little slow. I'll try and send you a better copy. Okay, first question. What advice do you have for someone who just purchased a home and much of the garden includes non-native plants? I want to transition the whole garden at some point, but can't do it all at once because of time and money.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, you can't. And yeah, you got to work in small patches. And I would just suggest finding a spot in the yard and starting there, starting on a spot that you can, and visiting a native plant nursery or the native plant sale. And this is actually something where I think an Audubon at Home visit would be very helpful to you. But that can be a challenge, I know. If you want to start killing turf grass so that you can start to plant in it, you can start putting down things like, cardboard with mulch on top of it or something like that. Because it's really hard to plant in the fescue and have the and have success.
I think we need to do another program on designing the garden. That's the hardest part, right?
Yeah, we'd have to get somebody else to do that
What
one
to
for
put
you.
where? Yeah.
I'll ask around and see if we can find somebody. And I know several weeks ago you had Julie Borneman speak, and that's another wonderful one to watch about native plants.
Can you talk a little bit about bluebells as what they attached and who they support?
You know what? I don't know what insects they support. That's a really good question. I'm sorry that I don't know. I think the early spring bees would go to the bluebells. I'm sorry, I don't know more about I don't know a whole lot about bluebells.
Can you tell us what growth conditions they need?
What growing conditions? Well, they grow along like rivers and stuff, so they need a fair amount of moisture, I find. I actually haven't been successful in growing them. And I've assumed that that's because the areas just have not been moist enough. They're also hard because any ephemeral like that, it's easy to lose them if you don't really set aside the area and mark where they are. And then you're going to have other things growing there throughout the season. So that's another challenge that personally I have.
If somebody wants to get started planting and they want to make sure that they have like a success early on, what can you name like one or two or three plants that generally do pretty well, that aren't as delicate like a bluebird, that that taste pretty good?
Yeah, so you know what? Joe Pye weed is a really fun one, and it really supports the pollinators. And there's different species of Joe Pye weed. And if you have a suburban yard that needs to look tidy, you can go for one of the cultivars that's much neater and smaller. Otherwise, if you can go a little bit wild, it makes a wonderful, beautiful, beautiful plant in the later summer, and easy to grow, spreads easily. I mentioned that golden ragwort, Pachyra aurea. We all love that, we native gardeners, because if there's any area you need to cover that, you just don't want weeds to come into, but it's an open area, that will just really spread nicely. I like this.
What is that one called, Nan? Did you say?
It's called golden ragwort,
or golden ragwort. Okay.
Scientific name is Pachyra aurea. Another one that I like that's similar to that is that blooms. So Pachyra aurea blooms really early now. Beautiful yellow flowers now. At the end of the summer, there's something called blue mist flower, conoclinum, that Also spreads really, really nicely. If you have a wilder area and you want to really try to get something going, and you kind of can't kill that. And it's got a beautiful bluish, lavenderish flower. Uh,
Name of that one again is?
so that is blue mist flower, and I think the
Yes.
genus name is Conoclinum. So I think you could look it up under Conoclinum.
Someone said asters.
Yeah, asters are great. Yeah, we have, well, at the nursery where I work, we have many, many asters, both for sun and for shade. New York aster and New England aster are very popular. Beautiful purple color, really attract the bees and the butterflies. And yeah, they're fairly easy. I have an aster that's really aggressive and very hard to kill, and that's the white wood aster, and it likes shady conditions a little bit more. But again, I get monarch butterflies on it, and so yeah, there's many asters. You can find one.
And people are saying asters, not mums.
That's true. Yeah, really
And,
good
ast-
point. They're
and asters
just as beautiful and,
all
closely
blooming.
related, but yeah, please go with our native asters. We have so many nice choices. No reason to get those mums.
Another question, what about places that have deep shade where grass doesn't grow? Any suggestions on ground covers that can take foot traffic?
Yeah, foot traffic's a hard one. It's really hard to find something that's going to stand up to foot traffic. So that part I'm not sure what to advise with. That the golden
Some
ragwort.
herbs like
Hmm?
a thyme. Would you
You could
recommend
put that
something?
in. That's not a native, but sure,
Yeah.
you could put that in. I mean, yeah, I'm certainly of the mindset that, you don't have to use all natives. If there's things that are filling uses for you and they're not invasive, then that's great. Yeah, maybe something like a thyme. That's the thing. I don't know of people come and ask us in the nursery, and I'm not sure how many things we have that stand up to foot traffic. But in the shade, once again, that golden rackwort will actually go in the sun or the shade. Um,
There's two
another,
suggestions from attendees. One is Pachyra aurea will grow in deep shade.
mhm.
Probably can't withstand foot traffic though necessarily. And someone said, BJ said maybe Lear leaf sage. It's aggressive though.
Yeah, lyre leaf sage. Yeah, thank you, BJ. Yeah, actually, that is wonderful. I just got into growing that last year, and I just really love it. I have it in this difficult place on this slope that's somewhat shaded, and I know it's just going to spread really well for me. Um, so yeah, that's a great suggestion. Um,
And BJ said she agrees with golden ragwort. Oh, and someone else said anemone canadensis.
Canadensis, that's
Canadensis.
wonderful. Yep. Yeah, I'm still getting mine going. It's funny, it's taken me a year or two to get it going, but I know once it gets going, it will take off. I've actually seen this at BJ's yard because it really does cover nicely. And it's a beautiful flower. So yeah, that's definitely, and the common name for that is I guess we just call it the anemone. Um,
In that
yeah.
shade as well.
Yes.
And so is
Mostly shade.
the
I'm
leaves.
not, I think I've seen that in the sun, some sun as well, so I'm not exactly positive.
Okay.
Oh, and the sedges
Um,
are really fun to put in. A lot of sedges go into the shade. There's one called seersucker sedge, which is Carex plantaginea. And it's really got a beautiful, lush looking leaf. And in the early spring, it sends up this sort of interesting flower head because sedges and grasses do have flowers. They're just not showy flowers. But it will slowly spread too. I love things that spread and take over an area
oh yeah,
eventually.
we all do.
So that sedges are really nice, and there's some really pretty ones. There's some blue tinged ones that we sell, which I really like. Again, Carex is the genus for the sedges, so you can look at that. Mount Cuba just did a booklet that's online all about the sedges that they did trials on and picked which ones were the winners in terms of doing well. So you could also Google that.
Someone said he's furiously Googling all of these plants.
Oh,
Are there any?
come to the sale, because then you can like take your time and look at the
Let's
signs and
see.
talk to somebody, talk to the owners and the helpers. It's it's
That
so
sounds
overwhelming at
awesome.
first, but I'm glad you are.
Are any native plants easy to grow from seed?
Yeah, I think some of them are. I'm not a big one on growing from seed personally. Um,
If anyone in our audience knows, feel free to.
yeah, I'm trying to think what I would start with if I were going to grow something from seed. Uh, yeah, maybe somebody will have a suggestion.
While we're waiting, is there anything that is an aromatic that is good for container backyard patio?
Aromatic in terms of you enjoy the smell or you want to keep the deer away? Um,
I think she means
okay, because it
that's
made me think that
a nice smell. Yeah.
there's this aromatic aster, which actually they say, I have been told that the aroma is not palatable, is not appealing to deer, but we'll see. Um, and let's see, things that would smell good. Well, the mints, I mean, the mints are wonderful, and there are many Virginia mints. They're not like the culinary mint that you have to keep in a pot because it will take over your entire yard. They're called Pycnanthemum is the genus, and there's a lot of them. Um, and they're great bee habitat. The bees just adore them. Now, these bees can come up onto your deck if you have them there, and the bees are not going to be looking to sting you because they're so busy foraging for what they're looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they don't form the colonies that the honeybees form, and so the honeybees like have to defend their colony. These bees are usually solitary, so they don't have a home to defend so much, or a hive to defend. So anyway, the mints are wonderful aromatic plants.
Someone's suggesting a columbine, if you're looking for something to grow from seed.
Mm,
Those are beautiful flowers.
yeah, yeah.
I think they were native, though. I thought that was more like in
Um,
Colorado
we
or
have yeah, we have both. I think we might have native and non-native. I mean, sunflowers. We have a lot of native sunflowers. Those would be fun to grow from seed. Um, I think you'll probably grow.
mountain mint
Yeah,
and
that's the one I was just talking about. That
yeah,
smells
some and
beautiful.
anise hyssop.
Oh yeah, yeah. Another great. Oh, that smells like licorice. It's actually one of my favorites. I'm so glad somebody wrote that in there. It's great for the bees. It smells wonderful when you crush the leaves. Beautiful, sort of lavender-ish spike. And or maybe they were saying they grow it from seed. I don't
Yeah,
know.
growing from seed and
Okay, yeah.
smells good. And
Yeah.
smells good,
I
both.
actually
Yeah.
did just grow it from seed this year, come to think of it. I haven't planted it out into the garden yet.
What would be a good plant for containers? A plant or two or three.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I'm not as good with that. Hostas in containers look beautiful. We had these beautiful containers last year at the nursery, and I bought a bunch of them. Hostas with this native sedum. Not hosta. Heuchera. Heuchera. Sorry.
You spell
Hosta's
that?
not native. The heucheras, which come in many different colors.
Spell
Those are like coral bells is the common name.
that? Okay.
So they look great in a container, and then like around it you could put this native sedum. It's called sedum ternatum. And
That
what's that? You have
can you
that one?
spell can you
Oh,
spell that?
ternatum is ternatum. Trying to think what else is around this in this pot because it worked really well. Yeah, other people in the nursery are better at advising on pots than I am.
That's another program we need to have.
Yeah, right.
That's a better in-person one. We can bring a couple things.
Yeah.
Can Huchera grow in sun?
No, I think it always needs to grow in shade. Yeah, I'm not aware of any of them that grow in the sun. And you know, we haven't mentioned the ferns. The ferns are a great plant. The ferns are usually not palatable to deer because of the texture. The deer don't like that texture. And most of them like the shade, but we have a few that like the sun or can tolerate the sun. And you know, many of them spread. The ferns are just beautiful. So I do want to mention that too.
And about planting.
I'm sorry, I missed
We're
that.
all getting so excited about planting,
Oh,
the nice
good. Yeah, yeah.
weather. And someone's asking if you're a beginner gardener, which nursery is the best for a novice?
Well, okay, I work for one of them. So is that okay if I mean
I mean, I'm sure there's experts in all the nurseries around here. Watermark, I know, does specialize a lot in the native plants, and it sounds like
yeah.
that Claude Moore sale is a great place to go to get more information from knowledgeable,
Or you can come
people
to
about.
the sale that we have.
That's what I'm talking. Sorry,
Yeah,
Morven Park, not
the
Claude
Morven
Moore.
Park
Yeah.
one, we have at least three vendors, Watermark Woods, um, Nature by Design, and Hill House Nursery. And those are all really solid sellers of native plants that will sell you native plants. Many other nurseries actually will tell you something's native, but it's not something that they really know. Maybe the employees actually don't even know which is native and which isn't. So, I would suggest going to one of these three nurseries that specializes in natives, or look at the Plant Nova natives list. And in Loudoun County, Watermark Woods is the one that's convenient for all of us. So even though I work there, it is the convenient one. And we do. Julie Borneman is the owner, and she, yeah, uses only natives.
Someone is also suggesting Earth Sangha in
Oh yeah, thank
Alexandria.
you, thank you
Yep.
so much. That's very
Also a
important.
native plant nursery that grows only ecotypes.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. They're in Fairfax, and yes, they specialize in ecotypes, and that means they try to grow plants that are really adapted to the immediate region that you're in, because of course plants have genetic variation over space. And so if you buy something, you might be buying something that is really adapted to some other region. And so there is a movement among some native plant people to emphasize the ecotype.
Watermark opened in April, right? Someone's asking if it's open
Yes,
now.
it's open.
Okay.
It's open every day but Sunday and Monday.
Help you get started gardening with native plants.
Was that a question? Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I'm just asking if there are any other questions.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, please go to library.loudoun.gov to see some other great programs we have on gardens and animals and nature. And also the Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy has some great programs. We've also got books to help you with your gardening. So, yeah, thank you all for attending so much. And Nan, thank you for a wonderful presentation.
Thank
Happy
you.
gardening, everyone.